to Reclaim Democracy. I'm Russ Gay, a member of Reclaim Democracy. I'll be hosting today's show. Reclaim Democracy is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to restoring the democratic authority to citizens. We advocate for a truly representative democracy within our Republican form of government, a goal that is unattainable when corporations wield direct power over elections, government, and society. We strive to work proactively for systematic change that will empower average citizens in the political arena. We focus on taking on local actions to advance this mission. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Jackie Brown Miller, a local activist attorney. She is also a member of Reclaim Democracy, the Olympia chapter.
Hi, Russ. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. So, Jackie, you were part of a small group of people who spearheaded a chapter of Reclaim Democracy in Olympia. Could you tell us about that?
Well, the national organization, Reclaim Democracy, years ago saw a problem in our government that while it has the structure of a democracy, it no longer acts as a democracy because citizens are no longer acting as the architects of their destiny through the democratic process, as should be the case in a democracy. So, in other words, citizens are not in control of our government because they cannot exert enough influence over government to obtain the laws and policies that they desire in order to protect their health, safety, and welfare. And the local chapter of Reclaim Democracy is plugging into this and moving forward.
So, why aren't we living in a functioning democracy?
Well, that is due to a complex set of structural and legal impediments. One is called corporate personhood, and the other is called money as speech. And those are sort of shorthand phrases that describe the problem. Corporate personhood is the phrase used to describe the fact that corporations have assumed our civil rights, and they exercise those civil rights in the courts to assure that they can be the dominant influence over our government through the exercise of their free speech rights. And the other one is money as speech. That is a legal doctrine that money used to influence the political process is protected under the First Amendment as free speech.
What is Reclaim Democracy doing about this?
Well, we're taking local action to educate people about the effects of these legal doctrines on real everyday people and to reverse these legal doctrines. And we hope to be very effective because we are coordinating our actions through the national headquarters, which in turn is overseeing activities going on in other cities and other states.
This may sound like a really basic question, but could you talk about what civil rights are?
Sure. Well, early Americans believed that their creator bestowed upon human beings inalienable rights, and that these rights needed to be protected from the tyranny of the majority or from mob rule, which can easily happen in a democratic system. So they preserved these rights in the Constitution, and they called them civil rights. Thus, we are protected from majority rule, or our civil rights are protected from being harmed by majority rule. And we can use the courts to strike down any laws that unconstitutionally infringe upon our civil rights. And now, of course, corporations can do that as well.
So, how exactly have corporations assumed our civil rights?
Well, it started in 1886 in a case called Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. And early Americans had not intended for corporations to possess civil rights. Early Americans actually distrusted corporations because the king, or the English crown, used the crown corporations to oppress the colonies. Yet in 1886, the corporations succeeded in obtaining a Supreme Court precedent that they are to be considered people under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Okay. How do corporations use these civil rights now?
Well, over the years, they've expanded their reach into the Constitution to other amendments besides the 14th. They especially the First Amendment. They now have rights under the First, Fourth, Fifth, and other portions, those amendments and other portions of the Constitution as well. Essentially what happens is we the people, through our government, pass a law. We manifest our will, and a law is passed. And a corporation says, well, we don't like, a corporation will say, I don't like that law. And it will go to court to strike down that law, which is the manifestation of the will of the people using its civil rights to do so. Corporations particularly like to go to court to strike down laws that they say violate their First Amendment right when laws are passed by the citizens to try and limit the amount of influence corporations can have over government.
Okay. So under corporate personhood, corporations have the same civil rights as we citizens do?
Basically, for the most part,
okay.
yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about the concept of money as being free speech?
Well, it's really the ability to use money to influence the political process.
Mm-hmm. Where does that concept come from?
In the late 1970s, there were several corporate-backed lawsuits, and they made it to the Supreme Court and resulted in 2 Supreme Court decisions, which basically ended up with creating legal precedent that political expenditures to influence elections, campaigns, elections, and the citizens' initiative process were an unconstitutional violation of the corporation's free speech rights, and essentially granted to corporations with those 2 cases political free speech.
Okay. Now, in this you're referring to Buckley versus Vallejo in 1976, and also the First Bank of Boston versus Bellotti in 1978?
Yeah, First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti.
Okay. It sounds like this inserts a wealth bias into our elections and our democracy. Is there a problem with this?
Oh, absolutely, in my opinion, there is. The problem is that anytime you have a wealth bias in how people can influence the political process, you have something that is akin to minority rule. Now, the Supreme Court struck down the poll tax years ago in order to get rid of a wealth bias in our elections. But with money as constitutionally protected political free speech, wealth bias and minority rule continue. And so technically we have a structure of democracy, but in practice we have something akin to an oligarchy where the wealthiest get the most access and influence over government. Now, this is anti-democratic, and it arguably violates the 14th Amendment because we the people are not all able to have equal access in government.
Now, in money as speech, is that a problem for corporations? What about for wealthy individuals as well?
In my view, while it is not good for any one citizen's wealth to provide that citizen with more access and influence over government than any other citizen, it is much worse for a corporation to have more access and influence over government than average citizens do. Unlike humans, corporations are singularly motivated to amass wealth regardless of what the cost of this pursuit is on humans and on the environment. And also, corporations are exponentially more wealthy and powerful than the average citizen.
Okay. Why are corporations motivated for profit at the expense of everything else, as you say?
Under the federal shareholder primacy laws, corporate managers are mandated to make decisions that are most profitable to the company's stockholders or the shareholders or the owners. The stockholders and the shareholders and the owners are all the same thing. And they're required to make these decisions regardless of the impacts on the public. So a corporate manager who fails to choose all legally allowable actions that will bring more money to the shareholders makes him or herself vulnerable to a shareholder lawsuit.
Wait a minute, you're saying that, in effect, corporations are, they're mandated to function without a conscience?
Yes, in a sense, they are legally mandated to operate without a conscience. And this actually leads to lobbying, because not only are the corporate managers required to operate the business using all legally allowable means to send profit to the shareholders, but they take it a step further and they go to Congress and to the regulatory agencies and they lobby vigorously for laws and regulations to, let's say, undo the New Deal, or laws to allow corporations to pass larger and larger amounts of money to the shareholders, even when the corporation is operating in a way to pass very legitimate business costs onto the public. And these would be costs like maybe putting a scrubber on a smokestack to protect the clean air.
This is externalization of cost, correct? Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Externalization of costs is the practice of shifting the true cost of running your business off to the public. And for example, instead of paying to produce products cleanly, corporations will seek laws allowing them to pollute the environment while they remain unaccountable for the cost to the public and to other governmental agencies for things like disease, death, and any other misery or suffering that could be caused. And the wealthy elite are using the corporate structure as a vehicle to funnel as much money as they can into government to get these business-friendly laws, allowing massive externalization of legitimate business costs onto the public.
Mm-hmm. Here's an example of how much money is involved. In 1998, Ken Silverstein wrote a book, In Washington, on 10 million a day. He revealed that there were 8 big corporations which spent just over $75 million on lobbying and campaign contribution programs. How does this impact our democracy?
Well, that was what, in 1996?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a lifetime ago. I'm sure it's even more than that now. Well, what I would say to that is that if money is speech, then speech is not free. Mm-hmm. And if money talks, then we the people can never speak as loudly with our words as corporations can with money's unlimited amplification of their voices. And in a system where re-election requires big money, which generally can only be gotten with corporate contributions, then, you know, I mean, it's just a really big problem. And in a society in which this sector that is motivated to only ask for laws allowing massive externalization, where this is the sector that has the most control over our government, not only do we not have a democracy, but we seem to, it feels as if we're trapped on a train heading southbound over a cliff. And I wonder whether we can expect us to continue living in a healthy, a just, and a sustainable society 5 to 7 generations from now if we continue to have this institution as the dominant influence over our government's policies.
What kind of law should we expect if corporations do wield the dominant force in our government and regular people cannot?
We should expect laws that favor corporations' ability to make profit regardless of the expense to human health and the environment. I think if you look at a corporation, it lives, you'll see that it lives forever. And it can amass wealth all the while exponentially, wealth that is exponentially larger than that which most humans can amass. In fact, many corporations have economies that exceed the economies of many small nations. So if you couple this wealth and power with our civil rights and you give them not just a statutory privilege to influence our government, but a constitutionally based right to influence our government, then I don't think you can expect anything but laws favoring the corporate externalization practice regardless of the cost to human health, safety, and the environment.
Yeah, I think the key word there is suicide economy.
Yes, suicide economy.
What would you say to someone who argues that corporations are just large collections of people, and those employees should, or those corporations should possess civil rights too?
Well, that's kind of like a trick question, I guess, and it is a question that somebody who doesn't know the whole history of our country would ask, and maybe doesn't understand what our Constitution is about. Under the Constitution, we the people hold the power. We are the sovereign. All of the power rests with us, and we lend this power to government through a representative democracy. So the only legitimate power that lies with government is borrowed from the people. Now, we lent this power to our government to create corporations as artificial entities to serve our needs. And when the corporation stops serving our needs, then we should be able to regulate it. Corporations are not mentioned in the Constitution because our founding fathers did not intend for them to participate in our body politic. And corporations, as I said, were designed as artificial entities. For them to sort of turn around and to morph into one of the very individuals or people that is the sovereign that granted the right, the power to government to create them as artificial entities in the first place is kind of akin to Frankenstein's robot turning into what it did and turning on him and killing him. You know, it's kind of like a science fiction thing. And in fact, even certain Supreme Court justices have recognized that there is a danger to allowing corporations to become classified as people with civil rights. I'd like to read a quote. In 1978, Justices White, Brennan, and Marshall wrote in a Supreme Court opinion, "The special status of corporations has placed them in a position to control vast amounts of economic power, which may, if not regulated, dominate not only our economy, but the very heart of our democracy, the electoral process." And they continued that the state need not allow its own creation to consume it. And later on, I think in that same year, in a different opinion, Justice Douglas, a Supreme Court justice, wrote, "It is unthinkable in terms of the American tradition that corporations should be admitted to the franchise. The result would be a corporate political kingdom."
Wow. But shouldn't the people who work for corporations be able to exercise their civil rights through the corporate structure?
Well, corporations, the corporation's use of civil rights does not benefit the employees for the most part. The corporation itself is legally defined as the owners or the stockholders. The employees, they just work there, and they can and are fired and terminated whenever it is necessary to aid in larger shareholder profits. So those people with enough clout to marshal the corporation to speak on their behalf so that they can make more money faster by getting these laws allowing faster, bigger externalization are the wealthy elites that own the corporation. Now you might say, well, gosh, I have my retirement tied up in the stock market. But these people who have their retirement tied up in the stock market are not the people who are able to marshal the corporations to speak on their behalf. These people who have this power are the minority of U.S. citizens, because in the United States, only 10% of the U.S. population owns 81% of the stock, and 1% of the U.S. population owns 60% of the stock. So my retirement fund, you know, if you took the retirement funds of everyone that you and I know, it's like this much. So we're not the people who are getting corporations to speak for us. It's the wealthy elite who are the majority stock owners and the minority of citizens in our country. And often the interests of those who can marshal the corporate assets to speak on their behalf have interests that are actually antagonistic with those of the employees.
Great. One of the things your group is doing is you're reaching out to issue-oriented advocacy groups, like the environment, workers' rights, healthcare. Why is that?
We're building the next civil rights movement, and anybody, any citizen can participate. We are reaching out to issue-oriented advocacy groups in order to make them recognize something, which is if they feel they are winning some battles but are overall losing the war that they're fighting because government sides with corporate profits over the environment, over health care, over peace, or whatever their issue is, it is because no one has addressed the root of the problem, that corporations can wield more power over government to get business-friendly laws than citizens can wield over government to get citizen and people-friendly laws. And if we don't do anything to fix the root of the problem, then advocacy groups will continue to lose whenever they face corporate steamroller tactics within the political arena to get the corporate way with government. And so we want to build coalitions with, across all advocacy groups that we can to bolster reclaiming democracy and to help build the next civil rights movement.
You know, right now I'm sure there's people out there that are thinking, my goodness, is this anti-corporate, or even worse, is this anti-capitalism? Maybe you could speak about that.
It's neither of those things. I think this is about citizens, it's about corporate accountability, it's about citizen power over government through democracy, and it has nothing to do with our economic system itself.
What about, is this possibly a partisan issue?
It's a nonpartisan issue. I just heard the other day, I don't remember the representative's name, but there's a Republican in Ohio who has been practically talking about corporate personhood and saying, corporations have too much power over our government, this has gone too far. It's absolutely nonpartisan, and as I said, I like to call it the next civil rights movement because all citizens, regardless of their political persuasion, need to have an equal voice and an equal opportunity to be the architects of their democracy through the democratic process.
Okay. We the people are not in charge of the important decisions made in the economic and political sphere that impacts our daily lives. We're not in control or living in a democracy. These are systematic problems blocking our control over government. Until we face these problems head on, we will not be in a position to create rules that we need to live in a just, humane, or sustainable society.
Right.
You can find out more about Reclaim Democracy and how you can become involved by visiting Reclaim Democracy. We need plenty of energetic and smart people to help us.
reclaimdemocracy.org, and you can find out about our local chapters by clicking on local chapters and then going to Olympia and Seattle.
Okay, thanks very much. We have about maybe 5 minutes left. Maybe you could personalize this a little bit and kind of give a very clear image of how people can get involved besides contacting us, and what they can do about that. How are the corporations using corporate personhood, and what can we do to stop that?
Well, again, government passes a law. That law is the manifestation of the people's will in theory, and not corporate will at this point. But the corporation doesn't like a law, and so it uses the courts to strike down that law because they say that law violates our First Amendment right to free speech, or our Fourth Amendment against unlawful search and seizure, or it violates our Fifth Amendment right against unlawful taking of property without just compensation, or it violates our 14th Amendment protection against, or 14th Amendment protection against unequal protection, if I'm saying that right. But corporations have used these civil rights to strike down laws that we've tried to pass as citizens that limit their power over our government. They've stricken down laws saying they can't participate or influence the citizens' initiative process. They've struck down laws saying you have to label milk if you have a growth hormone in it. They've struck down laws saying you have to label your records if the lyrics would be harmful as a violation of their negative free speech rights. They've struck down laws and regulations allowing US EPA to do surprise inspections to test compliance with the Clean Air Act under the Fourth Amendment protections against unlawful search and seizure. And they have struck down laws saying that they can't harvest trees full of spotted owls and things like that because that would mean there's a Fifth Amendment takings violation. So, you know, my own personal history with this is, I was just a kid growing up in Ohio in rural America, and my teacher told me we have a democracy and the best in the world, and I don't think that's true, and I'm out to fix it.
Oh. Well, thank you very much, Jackie. We appreciate your time here.
Thanks.